So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod. My name is James, your host, and today I'm joined by Alexandra, who we actually met helping me move country when I was working at Polestar. So I don't know if you want to give a short introduction for yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Alexandra, and just like you said, James, I basically work helping people and their families move countries, or so move to Sweden, or actually move back to their home country, depending on. So yeah, very interesting.
And where is it you've lived yourself?
Yeah, so I lived in San Francisco. It was a while back now. It was 2014 to 15. I was there for 8 months. It was for school, but not university. It was I chose to move and then like do English courses for 8 months. And then a while back, so it was 2018, I actually went to Taiwan for a semester abroad. So it was a part of my bachelor's program. We could do either, a semester somewhere else in Sweden or abroad. Could be an internship or school. So I did university in Taiwan for a semester, which was great.
Thank you for that, and we'll get into the podcast then. So hello and welcome to section 1 of the podcast. This is all about getting there. So you said you've kind of lived in California and you've also lived in Taiwan. So please expand about those two experiences. What was the reason for going? How did you get there? And what was it like actually doing it, really?
Yeah, so very, very different experiences. When I decided to move to San Francisco, everything was with very short notice. So I was studying at university here. I didn't really know if that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something very different. So I was researching moving to the States for a semester, a couple of months. So I applied. It's like a private, not university, but they help you sort of move for language visas. So that's why I did it. So I contacted ES then, let them know that, hi, I'm really interested in moving. I would like to move to San Francisco. I would like to be gone for longer than 6 months. What are the next steps? So I had a call and a meeting, and they explained me a little bit how it works. So a week later, I had paid the deposit, basically, which you needed to do so they could help you sort of secure your tickets. And nobody knew. So I didn't tell my parents. I came a week later. Hi, I paid a deposit. I'm moving in September. And this was around April. So they were great in helping me sort of explaining what I needed to do. So it was booking a time with the embassy because you needed a student visa. So everything was I just need to do it really, really quickly because the waiting time to even get an appointment with the US embassy in Sweden was 3 months. And then you needed to go up to Stockholm for an interview. And I made it quite easy for myself because the school did help you with accommodation slightly. You could choose if you wanted to be in student housing. Did you want to be with a host family? Did you want to search for something on your own? I wanted the full experience, so I decided to go with a host family. So everything was matched for me. So when I had my flight tickets on this date, this was the time. I had, my host mom picking me up from the airport. So everything was very laid out. And then at EF, so the school, they had the itinerary ready for me when I actually arrived. So it was a very quick process, very spontaneous. But the reason going was really because I didn't know what I wanted to study here. And rather than wasting my time, not really wasting my time, but just sitting here, I wanted to do something very, very different. And I'm very happy that I did because I speak, English every single day in my profession now. And I do think that it helped me. So, from that side, I think it was great that I did. I loved it. Then on the other hand, when I went to Taiwan, it was very different because that was through uni. So my university here in Sweden had partner university all across the world. So the initial sort of destination for me was that I wanted to go to Canada. I was very set on Canada, and I was going with my friends, my best friend now. We met through uni. We're like, we're going to Canada, we're going to Calgary, everything was very set. And then there was a little bit of a mix up. So you had, you could rank your top 3 choices. And our second one was Taiwan. It was very random. We're like, we'll just take something we don't even know what it is. So when we found out sort of that, if you do want to go together, you'll have to split up. And I was like, you know what? It's fine. I lived in the States. It's quite similar, I would think. So let's do something very different. So we ended up getting spots with Taichung University, a really big city. And the school helped us with getting us the spot, but we had to do all the paperwork on our own. So this school reached out requesting, forms. You also needed to provide, it was very different, but like vaccinations from when you were a kid. You had to get vaccinated for things before for you to even enter the country. So it was like hepatitis A, B, something else. So it was also quite a quick process, but it was a lot more things to do on your own. And then there, I think we also got, we could get, in Sweden, you can get governmental funding when you study. So we could get that. And also we applied for a scholarship because we were moving quite far away. And housing, we found everything on our own. So we did Airbnb for those 6 months we were gone. It was actually very, very smooth. Had a great apartment.
Amazing. It must be quite fun to be in an Airbnb for that long because they're quite nice and well maintained, as opposed to like a hostel for 6 months would be a different experience.
Yeah, it was. We lucked out, I would say. Definitely lucked out. We were quite far away from the university, but it didn't, we were in the city center, a really big city as well. So we were incredibly happy, I would say.
And what were you studying to be able to move to Taiwan? Was it language again, or?
So I did my bachelor's, I did within international politics and economics. So it was quite limited depending on what you wanted to do, but we decided to do international business administration when we went there. So we got sort of that aspect of it as well. It was a great thing to just really have within my education. You could choose almost anything. It's like we could do language. That this made the most sense. And I think that in Taiwan, a lot of the schools are very geared towards finance or business administration. So more that side rather than what I studied more, which was, human rights, immigration, sustainability. So it was more geared toward that side. But I feel like it was such a good complement now. Like looking back on it, I'm very happy that I chose that.
Completely. And I'm assuming your course was in English when you were in Taiwan, or was it in another language? Maybe it wasn't Swedish, but
it was in English. So we wanted to do, it was Mandarin, but it was a little bit, it's such a difficult language. It's very different. So we did everything in English. We decided that it would be best to focus on one thing for those 6 months.
Yeah, having worked for a Chinese car company before going into the kind of Geely family, I was exposed to more Mandarin, and it was impossible. I think I have a business card still with my name in Mandarin on, and I have no idea what it says. Well, it says James Doran, but I don't know the actual way of saying it. It might say something really rude, but
I had to visit like a local health clinic in Taiwan, and I was like, "Can you please fill out my insurance form, which I need to bring to Sweden in English?" He was like, "Yeah, absolutely, fine." And then he started, and then the last half is all in Mandarin. I was like, you know what, I wouldn't even submit it. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I'll Google Translate it. You just hover over with the phone.
No, even that doesn't work.
Yeah. That's usually my get out clause. But have you kind of lived anywhere else or been anywhere else? Or was it just obviously Sweden, Taiwan? and California. Not that that's not a small amount.
Yeah, living has been the three of those. I traveled quite a bit when I lived in Taiwan. It was very easy to get around within Asia. And then obviously my parents are from Serbia. So I never lived there, but summers were spent almost, when we were younger, it was up to 10 weeks at a time. So I do have a different culture sort of in my roots, basically.
So you're a Novak Djokovic fan then?
Yeah. I think you have to be. I think it would be bad if I weren't.
I don't really like him that much. I respect him, but he annoys me as a character.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's a little bit arrogant, if I do say so myself. But I mean, well deserved, at least.
Unless you have anything more to kind of bring with the kind of getting there, we can move to the next section. Hey, so welcome to section 2 of the Expat Pod, all about being there. So Alexandra, you mentioned that you've lived in California and San Francisco and also Taiwan. Obviously, they must be quite different experiences coming from Sweden. What was your first impressions of each place? Obviously, you were much younger when you went to California than you were to Taiwan, so maybe you had a different outlook on life, and if that changed as you kind of got older and started your degree. So it'd be quite interesting to understand, when you took off the plane, what did you first think when you arrived in each location?
Yeah, so I was 20, I think, when I moved to San Francisco, and I moved all alone. So I, decided to do it myself. I was so jet lagged and so overwhelmed when I got picked up at the airport that, I can't remember the first day, but I do remember the second day. When I was heading to school, there was this Starbucks right around the corner, and my dad called. He was like, "Hi, how's it going?" I was so overwhelmed. I started crying. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, where am I going? And he was like, "Okay, calm down." But when I sort of walked into the school, so I think it's very different because everybody is basically in the same situation. So some had been there a couple of weeks, some had been a couple of months, some were like totally fresh. So because everybody was foreigners, basically. I felt that sort of eased my mind a little bit, and you could get some advice from people who had already been there for a while. So you didn't really feel alone. Everybody was in the same boat. And then obviously, people who had lived there for a little longer had, made some American friends. It was just a lot easier to integrate. But I would say that very different because when I moved to Taiwan, I moved with my friend, so from uni. So we did it together, and we spent a month in Bali before. But that experience was also quite different because I got very food poisoned in Bali. So my first week in Taiwan, I didn't go anywhere. So she did everything. She located like the bus to school, but very different in terms, I would say everything. I was more overwhelmed in the States, but then when I moved, to Taiwan, I was a bit older, so I was more secure. I think even if I would have moved alone to Taiwan, I would have been a little bit more confident. You'd already done it. You sort of know what to expect. But in terms of, the experience around it, I would say that San Francisco, I would say that mindset is more close to a European mindset and to a Swedish one. I did find that people were incredibly friendly, in my opinion, much more open than maybe people in Sweden. People strike up conversations on buses and trams and subways. If you didn't have your headphones plugged in, somebody could just walk right by you and like strike up a conversation like, "Hi, how are you doing? Where are you heading to?" Just very random, very open. And in Taiwan, it's a different culture, different kinds of people. We still had quite a lot of expats within our courses and at the uni, but a lot of local people, not that many tourists where we actually were. So you were a little bit more immersed into the Taiwanese culture, and people were so friendly, like incredibly friendly, a little bit more shy, but super nice, obviously a little bit more of a language barrier. but people found, ways to show you around and where you should go, what you should eat, what you should try. More curious, I would say. I was equally as curious as somebody who met us on the street, like a local person. So I think very two different experiences. One I did on my own very young, and then one with a friend when I was a little bit more confident, I would say.
Yeah, it's an interesting point to make. I also went to America when I was 20. I turned 21 there, so it was quite fun. But I went to do a Camp America thing where I just taught kids to go-kart in the summer, which was quite interesting, and then I went traveling. Obviously not for any educational purposes, but more for just to do something in the summer in between my engineering degree.
Yeah,
like you said, I went to New York, which is obviously a huge city. But if you compare like London, which is also a big city, it feels like Sweden, where people don't really communicate on the bus or on the tube unless you know them prior. Which is kind of like Sweden, where I saw a meme actually last week of like, you're Swedish if you sit on the bus to the side and don't let anyone sit next to you. And like, I was like, oh, this is actually so true.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how like it's the complete opposite in the States, because they're obviously also charismatic. Probably is a best description of them in terms of like being so wanting to just converse with everyone and have a relationship in some way. Which I think Swedes do the opposite of that. They have fewer relationships, but probably much deeper relationships, which are quite difficult to comprehend initially. If you're moving, I guess for you as a student, maybe it's a bit easier because you're moving with lots of other students. You moved alone, but you weren't alone in that sense, because maybe 5 or 6 other people moved from other parts of Europe, or other parts of the Americas, or Asia, or Australasia, or somewhere. So you had a mutual kind of situation where you're all in this place and you're all from somewhere else, which is really quite nice.
It is quite nice, but it's like you say that I feel it as well, coming to the States, it was very different because I am one of those people that in some situation, but I have a close, small group. But it's like you said, people are, I think, quicker in the States. People were quicker, even Americans I met, to be, oh, we're having a barbecue. Like my family's having a barbecue. Why don't you come with us? Or we're having dinner, me and my family and a couple of friends. I feel like that was more of a recurring thing there. It was more common to just invite this random girl who has been here 2 weeks to, go out to dinner with family or friends. I do feel a little bit like that's not really the case here in Sweden. It depends. But I'm also, I was born and raised in Sweden and then have a different culture in the background. So even in Serbia, it would be more like the United States that you would invite, people, especially new people. So it's quite interesting to see how it differs.
It's an interesting point you mentioned about the kind of Serbian heritage. How was that growing up? Because obviously when I was working in Sweden, I noticed there was a lot of people from the Balkan region because of obviously what happened before the millennium, which is obviously not a very nice thing, but meant a lot of migration to Sweden happened from Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, etc. Do you notice the difference in growing up in a Serbian household but in Sweden versus a Swedish household, or is it not so much because of your generation?
I think it's definitely a little bit of both. Both my mom and dad are from the Balkans, but mom was born in Sweden, and then my dad, he came here when he was 18. My grandparents came before them, and yes, I think I get the best of both worlds a little bit in terms of having different cultures. I definitely immersed myself into the Swedish culture, traditions and customs and culture-wise, but I also have, I think, a different openness in the back of my mind a little bit as a person, and I do believe that is a little bit and has to do with having, parents that aren't Swedish in that sense. So on the one hand, I have my group of friends that I've known for so long, but then also I think I am very open in general when I meet new people. I think so. I'd like to think so. I hope so. But I think also it's a combination of, being a person who's lived abroad.
It must help with your job.
Yes, it does. And I think it's a combination of having, growing up in two cultures, and then also being a person who's lived abroad in different cultures. So I think I do believe that I am a little bit more open, still a little bit reserved. I think everybody is and should be, but more open to, inviting other people, especially when I've been in the similar situation before.
And kind of going back to your time in California and Taiwan then, just to go back to being there part of the podcast. What was it like culturally? Obviously, you mentioned the friendliness of America versus Sweden, and obviously the huge different culture in Taiwan. What was it like in terms of how did you get on with the different cuisines? Obviously, the language barrier in Taiwan might have been significantly higher. You said that you found ways to kind of breach that. What were those ways? Like I said, that people might move to other countries where English or their own language isn't widely spoken, so they might need some assistance in order to communicate with people in a non-verbal sense.
I mean, cuisine-wise, it was very different in Taiwan. I'm not gonna lie, I'm quite the picky eater, so it was definitely, especially if you can't read the menu. If there's not, in many places, because it was such a big city, it did say in English underneath, but there were places where, it was only Taiwanese, and I did not know what it was I was ordering. So we did actually end up doing a lot of cooking on our own evenings, but it was also a way for me and my friend to sort of hang out. So we would, come back from classes. It was quite a long commute time from school. It was 75 minutes one way. Went to the market, bought fresh produce, grade food, and then cooked. And then we would go out. So, but in terms of, being understood, a lot of pointing, or trying to, have the apps where you speak and it speaks, it translates, which doesn't always work, but a lot of pointing on maps. And I do remember it was our second week, we found a sushi place. So we were like, great, we'll go grab some sushi. And then you come there and everything is like in Mandarin. Like you can't read anything. I was like, okay, and there are no photos of nothing. So you don't know if it's salmon, if it's tofu, if it's shrimp, what is it? Then it's like, okay, well, we'll just have to try to sort of Google our way around. And that's even harder. We lucked out because there was a woman that heard that, we didn't understand anything, and she actually knew English. So she was like, let me know what it is you want to eat, and I'll go ahead and order it for you. So she helped us. But it was, a lot of like showing photos. Like, do you have chicken? Do you have rice? Like, do you have vegetables? So a lot of just like photos with everything. But it was, you kind of learn. It's a good learning experience on how to move around when you don't have, the language at all. We didn't have it at all. We could say hi and thank you, and that was it.
Did you finish knowing a lot more, or knowing much Mandarin when you came back?
No, I'm sorry to say it's horrible, but no. I knew, we tried to pick up, sentences, and then we thought we would nail it, and then the driver or whoever would look at us and like, what are you talking about? We're like, we probably didn't say it properly. It's definitely one of the...
that's how I feel with Swedish.
Yeah, that's also, but Swedish is also quite different in its own way. I've heard people say, but I would like to think that, Swedish is slightly easier. It depends on where you are in Sweden as well. We have a lot of accents here.
I think it also depends on what language you're coming from as well, if it's the same alphabet system or not. Because I learned a lot of German before moving to Sweden, and it reads very similar. Swedish and German, I think they've got a similar kind of base. Obviously, the pronunciation is completely different, which is what kind of threw me off, because you have random sounds like "huh," which I'd never heard of before. And then my friend from the Netherlands, he went into Coop or somewhere to get some food, and he didn't really eat much meat, and he knew the word for meat was shot, so he thought not shot was not meat, but it's beef. So he was like, well, I come home and I bought beef. Yeah. And I was like, well, this is not shot, so it should be not meat. Which was quite... We all found it funny at the time, but it was, a lesson was learned that day.
Yes, I can imagine. But that's how you learn, you know?
Yeah, from many mistakes of your friends, and hopefully not some mistakes of your own there. So anything else from your experiences of both countries? Would you go back? Would you go back to visit or stay? What would you recommend someone doing if they were moving to either of those places?
I would visit the States. Again, I would definitely visit and explore. And I would go back to San Francisco for, a vacation, I think. I don't think I would necessarily move back at this point. On the other hand, surprisingly enough, that if, I could definitely move back to Taiwan. It was such a good experience, and just climate-wise, the weather, really warm all year round. People are so friendly. I feel that it's a less, maybe we lived in a dream world, but a less stressful life. I like the States, but I do find that it is very Western. And I did feel, if I can say it, happier in Taiwan, in a lot of ways. I definitely think that people should take, a couple of extra minutes to just search a little bit about the place you're moving to, just to get really immersed in how is the culture. I didn't know anything about either places, so I learned. But I think that if I would move anywhere now, I would just do a little bit more research, culture-wise, also, with admin stuff. So what do you need to be there? How does the system work? Especially coming from Sweden, we have quite a solid, social security system. So I think those things, especially if you're moving long-term and not just, for 4 to 6, 7 months, I definitely think a little bit more research is very important, especially nowadays.
Yeah, I think also Sweden is very bureaucratic in a sense. It's a lot of paperwork to fill out and a lot of forms to tick before you can get things like a bank account or Swish, which is the lifeblood of Sweden. I feel that's like you need that so much. Some other countries maybe don't have that same barrier. I did find it quite stressful for a few months of when I first moved. I was like, right, well, I haven't got any way of paying for stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, when you have your personal number in Sweden, everything will be so much easier. But like you said, it is definitely a process that a lot of people do find stressful, which I completely get. On the other hand, for me, when I lived in the States, like opening up a bank account was super stressful. And there was no directions on what you needed and how to do it. And would you walk into the bank, you couldn't get an appointment. So I was, I put my hand up. I was, you know what, I'll do without. I'm fine. I'll use my, Swedish card. And then same in Taiwan. I mean, getting a SIM card with the data on your phone, nobody could explain like the different plans. Like in Sweden, you have a subscription of different kinds, or a prepaid one. Here, it was like, and it was so hard to find something that could explain. So we use Wi-Fi hotspots. I was without, 4G for 6 months, which was a struggle if you were in the middle of nowhere, couldn't call an Uber, anything to pick you up. But we lesson learned a couple of times. So there were different, I think that in Taiwan it was more language barrier that sort of made it difficult. And in the States, it was just also a little bit of a mess everywhere. I just felt so confused. So I was, I did a SIM card. I had US number, but anything else I just left.
Yeah, I think the US is often they're going in about 110% the entire time. Everyone is so busy. Everyone's always working so hard. Whereas being in Sweden, people work hard, but people go home really early. They, prioritize their family. They prioritize vacation. They prioritize skiing more than most things, or being on a boat. Like, it's the two things, depending on what the weather is. If you go skiing in the winter and go boating or sailing in the summer. Whereas the US, they don't really have that time to do either. They have Thanksgiving, they have all these amazing holidays where they spend with family. But the vacation time, I think, is a lot less, and people will work maybe 60 hours a week, as opposed to in Sweden it's 40 and that's it, which is a lot better for your long-term health and long-term mental health, I think.
Yeah, I think work-life balance in Sweden is completely different. And I find it so interesting because I help people move to Sweden. So I learn so much about, work culture, that's related to anything, basically, social security systems, how it works in different countries. And many times I find myself thinking, we have it so pretty good in Sweden. Like you said, you have your 20, 25, 30 vacation days per year. You do your 7 to 4 or 8 to 5. You prioritize a little bit differently, and the system prioritizes, family and healthcare a little differently, I would say. I learned so much about how it works in other countries, and that's also a very valuable lesson for me.
What's the most interesting country you've learned about then in your job? Because that's quite an interesting topic. What are a few countries would you think they do things completely different?
Honestly, I think it was the States. I don't know why, but I thought that the States were, so past everybody else in terms of different things. But I mean, I learned so much about, parental leave, how actually short it is, vacation days. Even Australia, I learned that, if you have, 15 vacation days, that was, if you had 20, it was a luxury, but 15 was like also really good. I was like, 15, that's, that's half of what we have in Sweden. So I think I was, very, very shocked to hear that. Never thought that. I thought it was actually quite more similar to Sweden in terms of those stuff. So, pretty developed countries, and it was a bit of a shock. It was a bit of a shock, actually.
Perfect. Well, I think, is there anything else you want to add around kind of being in either country?
I would say that, don't romanticize the States, but people are a lot more friendlier, especially in San Francisco, which, if you're keen on building a relationship, that is great for you. In Taiwan, I would say that side, language will be a barrier, but it's not, you'll make do. Like everything will be completely fine. You'll learn ways to communicate.
Well, we can put an end to section 2 and go into section 3. So welcome to section 3 of the podcast, all about, I guess it's a kind of a review of your time. So also includes some advice you want to give, but I think we've touched on a few things already in terms of advice in the kind of previous section, which has been great, and so appreciative of you kind of doing that. So it's now maybe a much shorter section, which is also great, but mainly kind of leaning into what you do for a career. Advice is probably one of your most useful kind of from my experience of working with you, the advice you gave was what was useful for me in terms of helping me move, especially with a lot of the specifics with regards to like closing my pension and trying to make sure I have bank ID for as long as possible, which I still have, etc. So I'd wonder if you could share some advice from leaving Sweden. What advice would you give someone who wanted to leave Sweden and explore somewhere else? It could be Taiwan, it could be America, it could be anywhere in the world. But for anyone who wants to, leave either.
I mean, things work very differently in Sweden. I feel like if a Swede would, move for the first time somewhere, the system is a lot different. Swedish people take a lot of things for granted. Personal number, bank IDs, all the things we have. This will be a little bit of a shock, I think. And, for somebody, I would just say that it isn't, it is quite stressful moving. It doesn't matter if you move to Sweden or from Sweden as a Swede. Things just don't work the same. And my biggest advice for anybody, moving from Sweden to another country or to Sweden is to read up on things that you would need either prior to moving or actually in the country and how those processes work. I don't know if that answered your question a little bit, but to be read, it's so much information, so you probably won't grasp all of it or understand it, but I feel like the more information you have about the things that are important, either way you move, is very valuable. So I knew very little when I moved, and I can imagine that, you search for jobs. It can be on LinkedIn or, specific companies' career pages, and you apply for a job, you get it, and then, you're, wow, I'm moving, great. But there are just so many factors, I feel like, that you kind of forget. So it's all, all the small stuff that is big. If a Swede moves to another European country, you have to think about, secure social security system. You can't be, registered in two. So are you keeping the ones in Sweden, or, are you deregistering from Sweden to register in another country? Moving to Sweden, it's the same thing. If you're from an EU country, and if you're not, if you're from a non-EU country moving to Sweden, you also, have immigration processes. There are different things, and yeah, you would know.
I mean, only by a couple of years. I'm not EU, but my passport still says European Union, and will do until 2028.
But yeah, just, to be well read upon things. And I do think that, having relocation support, either through your company or, an organization like a company such as the one I work for, it is quite valuable, especially, it's not only somebody that can explain how it works, but also why does it work that way? In Sweden, why do you have to visit the tax office 3 times? And why do you have to visit the bank 3 times before you have the Swedish ID card? Everything is so connected. And I can imagine that it's quite overwhelming, going on the net and then searching everything. And you're going to be so confused. So I think, having somebody, if you know somebody who's lived somewhere, that would be valuable, just to check, what do you need. It can be quite a stressful process, I think.
Yeah. One thing that helped me with Sweden was I had my colleague Victor, who was basically my surrogate in terms of my postal went to his house because I lived in a temporary accommodation, and then any official document was always in Swedish. It never had an English translation. So I was trying to use the bank portal that handles banking, and it never translated that part of the thing. So I was like, am I sending this to the right place? Because I was sending money back home. And I was like, I don't know what it's saying. And then I was pushing cancel rather than next. Because in England, cancel's on the left and next would be the bottom right. But in Sweden, it was reversed to utfall. It was like, that must be cancelled. So I'm not going to push that one. And then I kept having to redo the same document. And then same with Skatteverket and everything. It was all in Swedish. And then, you try and say hey or hemadu or something, and then people will suddenly start speaking to you in Swedish. So I'm like, that's the limit of my Swedish. Is this that? And I can ask for some food. But yeah, it was.
It's quite a funny thing that you mentioned that, everything, all documents are in Swedish, and that, you would assume that you could get it in English as well, but anything, you get your letter from your insurance company, everything, everything is in Swedish. You get, from the social insurance, and everything is in Swedish. And it's also a little bit limited if you were to, Google yourself. So you could have, 1 page of, information in English. But when you need to dig deeper into things that are of concern for you as an individual, you notice quite quickly that there's a limit to how much is actually being said in English. Definitely.
Yeah, and I have Kivra, the online post service thing, and I keep getting emails from them.
Yeah,
but it's never in English, and there's not an option to translate. So I just screenshot and then send it to my Swedish friend. Is this important? Okay, cool. And then obviously, some words I do know, and I've picked out themes. But if I miss the word inter on something, I could think it's something positive or negative because I've not seen that there's a not in front of it or behind it. So it's that was quite quite a baptism of fire, because I was paying for my house insurance still like 2 months after I'd left. And I was like, I don't need this anymore. Why am I still paying like 80 krones a month for something I don't need?
I know. And that's the thing, like you need to cancel. You need to cancel everything in Sweden as well. And you're like, it was a process of getting it. Now, how am I canceling things? Do I have to call? Who do I email? You can do it if you have mobile bank ID. You can mostly do it there, but then you need to navigate all the Swedish in between to be able to, cancel subscriptions or whatever it might be.
Yeah, definitely. I guess going forward then for yourself, do you plan to live anywhere else, or is kind of Sweden now where you want to stay? Or?
I don't know. I don't know if, I should say this, but I think I'm a little bit pickier with where I would live. I would definitely be open to moving if I had the opportunity. I think I would be very open to move. I am one of those people that, spontaneously like to move around. But I think it would have to be, a great opportunity and something that I really, really would like to do. I am such a family person, and I live, abroad twice. I think the only thing that would, make me stay here now is the fact that I really, really enjoy my job, the one I have right now. And I also have my family here. So I feel content, but yeah, that's not to say that if somebody, would present me with another opportunity, I would definitely take it. I think it's very valuable to live somewhere else. Even, you should try it. I think that people, if they do have the opportunity, you will learn so much about other people, other cultures, yourself. You can always move back if you don't like it. That's sort of a little bit my motto. Can always move back, but having the opportunity, I think everybody should take it.
Yeah, completely. I think I kind of echo you can always move back. Obviously, circumstances might not be perfect for some people who obviously are escaping certain things, but, most people who choose to live abroad and go through the kind of circumstances that we've gone through you can go home. But home is still existing, which is always quite nice, and it's quite a security in certain ways. Obviously, it can be expensive to get home, but once you've got home, then you can kind of go back to something you're used to. It's interesting that a lot of Swedes seem to be quite family orientated as well, I've noticed. I don't know if that's a cultural thing, or because people seem to live not far from where their families are, unless you've moved from Skellefteå and gone to Malmo or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I don't think I would move to another country, a cold country. I joke that I'm not made to live in Sweden and Swedish weather. I'm more, think I was, more destined for like Taiwanese, Indonesian weather climate. Everything on the Asian side would be, perfect for me.
I guess you're saying warm climates then you would prefer to cold, so maybe Malmo or Skåne could be somewhere you'd move to because they're warm, right?
I think they're slightly warmer, but you've been in Sweden now and you spent winter here.
Maybe Denmark.
Denmark, when sort of October, November comes in Sweden and you barely see the sun, like from all day, like it's the sun rises at 9 and then it sets at 3 and it's just gray all day. I think that would motivate me to just move somewhere else with a little bit more, sun hours during the day, because we don't have many October till February.
No, you're right. I did find it really interesting when I'd be like walking around a park or in Lindholmen, and if it's the sun's out and it's lunchtime, you just see all like Swedes just sitting there like looking towards the sun, and everyone's facing the same way. It's like the solar panels, just finding the optimum position to get the most energy from it. Maybe that's why you're so sustainable as a country, because you all like obviously adore the sun so much. So
We're vitamin D deprived here, I would say, for a couple of months.
Did have a lot of supplements.
Yeah, I don't know if it's how it is I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but here it is quite dark, actually, winter. Cold as well. Rains a lot.
It's very similar, I think. But we do get, I think, half an hour more per day, which I noticed. But the main thing is socially. So it's okay if it's dark. In England, you can still go out. People will still be out and socialising all the time, no matter what time of year is. In Sweden, I could walk for like an hour and see one person. And when I went to the Bruce Springsteen concert, and I was like, I've seen more people at this concert than I did the entire winter. And then I went to Way Out West, and it was a similar thing. Like, there's more people here than I knew existed.
That is very true. Swedish people come out when the sun comes out, and then they stay at home when October comes.
I still really enjoyed my time in Sweden, and learned a lot about the culture, a lot about and it's definitely something which I'll take with me. And I've got great friends from there. I've met some amazing people like yourself who've helped me along the way, and now shared your story and your advice, which very grateful for. Thank you for agreeing to do this and giving me some time on a Sunday morning. I know it's probably not the usual thing you do on a Sunday, but I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate everything you've done for me on a personal side as well, helped me move back, which has been wonderful. I know you've helped some of my colleagues as well, so I'm sure they're equally as grateful as I am. Yeah, and as always, if you did find something interesting in this podcast, then please let us know on social media. Obviously, we have Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everything you can have. There's something for this podcast. Not to say I'm very good at updating it all. Like my Twitter, or X as it's now called, is probably lacking a lot of engagement, which I need to work on. But it's still open if people wish to get in touch. I don't know if you want to share anything about your side, Alexandra.
No, thank you so much for having me. This was really cool. I mean, this is one of the things that I do love about my job. I get to meet, incredible people and do podcasts on Sundays, which I probably would not have had the opportunity to do. And I think thank you so much for having me. I definitely hope that there can be some, takeaways for people considering moving to Sweden, from Sweden, from my story a little bit. But definitely. I'll definitely promote the podcast. I already did it at work. I was like, oh, James has a podcast. I'm attending. They were super, super excited. So I'll make sure.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I'll make sure to share it. I think people can take some valuable lessons with them from the podcast. Definitely.
Right. Yeah, and anyone who's like, you're helping to move, just use it as part of your like material for moving. That'd be great. But I can't do anything. Go listen to this podcast. It's very good. It's
it's amazing.
It's getting there. I think I was amateur, especially the first few episodes where my audio was really, really bad. I think I've got a way of getting it better, but it's a learning curve, and I've accepted that. So, as we've seen with the recording, can be difficult.
I was just about to say, you can't be perfect at everything, and you do need to know, you need to learn to get better. That's how you evolve in everything.
I do wish I was perfect at everything. I'm sure everyone does as well.
Probably. We're all human,
Wonderful. Well, I guess thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time for the Expat Pod.